Welcome to the U3 Media Podcast, where our mission is to unite the world through coffee, connecting you to the farmers and coffee entrepreneurs through the stories they share. I'm Christy Ross, and joining us today is Dale Schotte, CEO and founder of Park Avenue Coffee. Welcome, Dale. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the benefit of the audience, I want to note that I have had the pleasure of getting to know Dale a bit. I've seen his operations in St. Louis, and he's been a very, very open and giving of his time and forthcoming with like a wealth of information that has helped us in our early stages of building our coffee business. So that's sort of a shout out to you, Dale, and a huge thank you already starting. Okay, you've been in corporate IT, you've owned a consulting business. So why don't you walk us through your background and your transition into coffee?
Yeah, it's actually a really great story. I don't think anybody ever said, when I grow up, I want to be a coffee shop owner or I want to be in the coffee business. You know, doctors, lawyers, firemen, policemen, but never in the coffee business. So I don't think there's many people you're going to talk to, Christy, that say, oh, from a young age, I wanted to be in the coffee business. There's always a transition. My transition was from IT. I was in IT for 20 plus years. And I was in corporate IT where I actually worked for a company. I have my own consulting company as well. So over about a 25 year period of doing that, I was hired by a woman who was opening a coffee shop here in St. Louis in a really great neighborhood called Lafayette Square. And she needed help. I actually met her through an acquaintance and through a gym that we worked out at the time. And she wanted to open a coffee shop in this really great neighborhood. It's called Lafayette Square in St. Louis. It's one of the really nice premier neighborhoods, pretty close to downtown, maybe just 3 or 4 miles out of downtown. And she needed somebody to help her with her point of sale, with her wireless internet, just her internal network. And so she hired me to do that. And at that time, I was a self-proclaimed coffee snob, if you will. And I know that's one of the questions that we're going to talk about later, and we can get further into that. And at that time, this was 20 years ago. So we're talking about there wasn't a whole lot of specialty coffee in St. Louis 20 years ago. And honestly, the big guys were around, but that was about it. And so anyway, at that time, so she hired me, and I love coffee, and it was an opportunity for getting to know a little bit more about coffee. And so I actually worked with her and her mother to open this coffee shop, and I got her wireless internet going, her internal network going. And before long, I realized that I was really falling in love with the coffee business. And it's, I always said that I love my IT job because I got to build relationships with my customers. Unfortunately, I had to, the byproduct, I had to fix their computer first. Then I could build relationships with those folks. Where with coffee, I saw this, I'm like, she's got people coming to her every day, and all she has to do is give them a cup of coffee. She's not fixing any computers, and she's getting to build relationships. I'm like, this is like the best of all worlds. And so I was just absolutely in love with the whole concept from the very beginning. So I got very involved because I was so excited about it. And I was helping her with things that weren't even part of the IT. I was helping her with her menu and coffee and different pricing and just different stuff that I probably should have never got involved with, but I just fell in love with the whole thing. And so even got down to a point where her husband and I were actually friends. And he's like, you need to talk to my wife. And I'm like, what? She's like, everything you think she thinks is a great idea. Every time I think something, she thinks is a horrible idea. And
my husband says that all the time.
Right. So she's like, here, go talk to she like, can you do me a favor? Go talk to her. She wants to paint this place pink and brown. And I think that would be great if it was a little girl's clothing store or something, but I'm not sure it appeals to the masses. So he said, I said, you know what? I just painted my dining room. This is, and again, 20 years ago, I just painted my dining room this robin's egg light blue color. I'm like, and it has brown trim. I said, so why don't you guys come over? Maybe we can get her converted to blue and brown. That's a little bit more widespread than, mainstream than what pink would be. And so they came over, and she's like, oh my God, I love this color. I think I'm going to paint the coffee shop this color. So, it got down to, I was even picking colors out before, and we still use those colors today, honestly. So 2.5 years later, at her grand opening, I said, if you ever want to sell this place, I am just in love. I'd buy it in a heartbeat. And so again, it was a great neighborhood. The build out was beautiful. She spared no expenses. The place was awesome. And so she's like, okay, it's her grand opening. She's not looking to sell at her grand opening. So 2.5 years later, she calls me and she says, hey, do you remember saying that at my grand opening? I'm like, yeah. She goes, you want to buy it? I'm like, no. That honeymoon has left, that ship has left the station. I said, I said, give me a couple of days. I'll think about it. I'm not sure now's the right time for me. She was going through her husband was going back to school to get his doctorate. She was pregnant with her first child. So, things were going in a direction that she didn't think running a small business was going to work. And honestly, it was kind of a hobby for her anyway, not really a viable business for her. And it was more of I don't really have to work, but if I have this little coffee shop to run, it'll be kind of cute and fun. So I will. So anyway, so I said, give me 2 days. I'll think about it. Full disclosure, I was going to tell her thanks, but no thanks. But, thanks for thinking about me. 2 days later, my sister calls me completely hysterical. I get her calm down.
This is 2006? Is this 2006?
This is in 2000. This is in 2006. That's correct.
Okay.
So this is in probably June of 2006. So she calls me. She's absolutely hysterical. I get her calmed down. I'm like, what's going on? She quit her job. Well, she had been with a major pizza chain for 20 years. At the time, she was 39 years old. So she worked for the same company. And the only job she ever had was for that pizza chain for 20 years. And so she was fine with the decision of leaving that pizza chain until she pulled in her driveway and saw this house that she just bought 6 months ago. She was a single woman. And now she only had one job in her life and she was unemployed. So she calls her little brother. I'm not sure what she thought I was going to do about it. But when I calmed her down, I'm like, hey, do you want to run a coffee shop? And she's like, what are you talking about? And she had no idea this offer was on the table. So I explained it all to her. I'm like, hey, if you want to run a coffee shop, I'll buy it. You can run it. And as long as we make ends meet, I'll pay you exactly what you're making today after 20 years with this pizza company. And you just run it. I knew then it would be, I knew I could trust her, obviously. I knew she would do the best job that she could do. And I trusted her to run the company. She did it for 20 years. And she's like, I can't do that. I don't even drink coffee. And I said, it's the same thing. Take out the pepperonis, put in little brown beans. It's still food costs. It's labor costs. It's customer service. It's hiring. It's training. It's scheduling. It's all the same stuff. So I finally convinced her that she could do it. So her and I opened the first coffee shop in 2006. We took over that existing coffee shop, which was honestly not very well run, not very well managed, and not open very often because the gal that owned it, if she didn't want to open, she wouldn't, or she wanted to close early, she would. So it wasn't managed all that well. So my sister went in, worked for them for 30 days before we took ownership. We took ownership on August 1st of 2006. And my sister worked there from all of July, and August 1st we took over. And that's how I got in the coffee business.
Okay, wait. So does she drink coffee today, Dale?
She does today. She didn't used to, but now she does.
You converted her.
We did. Yes, we have a convert for sure. So she is absolutely a coffee drinker today. Awesome. So yeah. So now, long story short, she is still involved, but she actually runs our baking operation. So we have a bakery as well, and she runs our baking operation today.
Okay. So let's actually talk about that a little bit, because you have accomplished a lot over all of these years. You own the roastery. You have 6 coffee shops. Is that right?
That's
6
correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you have other facets of your business too. So talk a little bit about the different facets of your business in sort of how it expanded, because I think that is super interesting, as well as the bakery.
Yeah. So as far as the coffee shop, my goals from day one were 4 stores in 4 years. And, you put goals in place, and sometimes you hit them and sometimes you don't. And we absolutely did not hit our goals. In 4 years, we had 1 store. But what we did do is when we started the coffee shop, we felt like it was a local St. Louis coffee shop, that we should do local fairs, support local roaster at the time, because we didn't roast our own coffee. So we supported a local roaster. We bought as many ingredients from either a local dairy or local wherever we could buy from. But there was one thing that we decided that we would make in house, and it was a specialty dessert here in St. Louis called gooey butter cake. And basically it's one of those things that was made by mistake, kind of like toasted ravioli is another St. Louis thing that was made by mistake. And basically a baker was making, just a brief history of gooey butter cake. A baker was making a deep butter cake, which is similar to a pound cake. And when they put it in the oven and it came out, it stayed real low in the pan. It didn't rise properly, and it got real caramelized around the edges. And so it came out of the oven, and they're like, well, obviously something went wrong. They remade them. They put them back in the oven. They came out right. Well, later in the day, the baker's wife came back in the kitchen and it's like, what's this? And she tasted it. And he's like, well, I don't know what it is because we made a mistake. Something went wrong. And she tasted it and she's like, you know what? It's awfully gooey. but it's really good. And so that was the beginning of gooey butter cake in like the 1940s. And so they started making it and selling it. And that's where it all started. So,
and I've had that. It is amazing. I'll tell you, until I tasted it from you, I had never had it before. Right. I had never even heard of it.
Yeah, it's very, very local to St. Louis. Yeah.
So as your business grew and you opened the bakery and you do wholesale and retail and a lot of different actually other services for other companies that are getting started in the coffee business, like you sort of had talk a little bit about sort of your mindset of growing your business. I have a life motto that is, opportunities all around you, pay attention, but you have to grab it. And so I look at you and you're like the epitome of it, though. You're the epitome of that. And I
want to use that saying because I think that's exactly it. I think that's where I started saying, my goal was 4 stores in 4 years, and I had it all planned out, but opportunity didn't plan it that way for me. And I think the big thing that people make mistakes in is they say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my nose to the grindstone. I'm not going to look at anything else. I'm going to put the blinders on, and this is what I'm going to do. Well, if I had done that, who knows where we'd be at today. But every chance that we had, so, we started doing the gooey butter cake in the original coffee shop. And we were actually roasting for we were baking for 5 other coffee shops. And we were also baking for 5 grocery stores out of this one little bitty 900 square foot coffee shop with like a 300 square foot kitchen. It was miserable. We grew that business to a point where we had to say either we're done with this. So the whole point, I missed one point that I want to go back to on the gooey butter cake. When we were starting the local company, we wanted to support local, and what's more local to St. Louis than gooey butter cake? We went to my mother, and it's her recipe that we started with. And so my sister started making that gooey butter cake in the coffee shop, in the kitchen, in the coffee shop. And we started out with 1 traditional flavor, and it's grown to 2 and 3 and 4. And now we have 75 flavors. So with that,
75 flavors. Hold on. That's a lot of, how do you actually even manage that?
Well, that's a great question. And poorly, I would think, if we now have gotten to a point where we do 10 flavors at a time. So we rotate through the flavors. But up until COVID, when everything changes in our world and everything changed, we did 75 flavors every day. If somebody ordered that flavor, we did it every day. It was not very manageable. But anyway, so it's my mom's traditional recipe, and it kind of grew to a point where when we had all that in the basement, we had in the coffee shop, we had to make a decision if we're going to be a bakery or if we're going to be a coffee company or both. My sister wanted to continue to pursue the baking. So we launched Ann and Alan Baking Company, which is my sister's middle name is Ann and my middle name is Alan. And that's where it comes from. And the tagline is Baking Mom Proud. So to finish that story.
I do love that. That is awesome. So wait, so your bakery as well as your 6 coffee shops, those are all in the St. Louis area?
So our bakery is in a neighborhood called Dogtown, which is just about 3 miles from our original coffee shop, and probably within 4 miles of every location we have except for one. All of our locations are in the city limits of St. Louis. We do have one location that is in Washington, Missouri, which was one of our wholesale customers that we acquired about 4 years ago. And so that is called the Washington Coffee Shop, but it's still owned by Park Avenue.
So what do you love about St. Louis? What is the attraction to staying there in St. Louis? Or will you ever branch out outside of the limits of Missouri?
That's a great question. I mean, I think every big city has challenges these days. Things are so much different with office capacity and everything. But as far as St. Louis goes, we really doubled down on the city and from the very beginning thought, you know what? We're a local company. We should stay in St. Louis. We should support St. Louis with, like I said, local vendors, we buy all of our dairy from a local dairy, supporting local employees. All of our money stays in St. Louis. We buy very little, of course, other than coffee that's not grown in St. Louis. We buy very little outside of St. Louis. And I think it's just being proud of the city that you live in, and really just supporting that city. And I think I don't know any different. I was born and raised in St. Louis. I've lived here my entire life. I've been within 25 miles of where I'm at right now for my entire life. I've always lived here and I don't know any different. So it's home. It's family's here. Friends are here. It's home. So I just want to stay in my hometown and continue to support that.
Yeah. It's an advantage too. You know it, you love it. You know the neighborhoods, you know what, people like and they don't like. It's sort of like a home run already for you.
It's geographic as well, right? So obviously we're all right now, everything's within 5 miles of each other. So if I need to go to 4 stores today, they're all 5 miles apart. If they're 100 miles apart, that makes it a little bit more logistically challenging as well.
The added layer of complexity when you start to look at location. Totally. I agree with you.
So I do want to go back to that opportunity question because I think that's exactly where I'm at. I want to use that phrase if I can, because my advice today is that exact thing. Opportunities are all around us. You just have to your eyes have to be open and you have to be ready for them. So we opened our bakery in 2009. It's a freestanding building about 2 miles from our original coffee shop location, about a mile from our roasting facility. And my sister's running that. I have a landlord call me from downtown St. Louis and says, hey, I want a coffee shop in this location. And I was like, you know what? We'd love to be downtown. It's right by the convention center, but right now is not the time for us to expand. We just opened this bakery. Everything's been bootstrapped at this point. We have no loans. We have no partners. We have no money. It's just home equity line of credit to start the first coffee shop. And my home is on the line and I'd really like to get that off the line before I start expanding too much. So like 2 weeks later, the guy calls back and he says, hey, we still are looking I'm like, I'm still not looking. I really am not. So like the third time the guy calls me a couple months later, he's like, we still haven't found the right partner. We really would like to work with you. I'm like, here's the deal. I have $0 for build out. I have $0 for equipment. And if you can fix all that and I can walk in and turn the lights on, I'm your guy. He's like, do you have time to look at a space this afternoon? I'm like, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So he had an existing coffee shop that was failing and was leaving the lease, and he couldn't find anybody to take it over at the time. And so he wanted us in there because he knew we had been around at that time. We've been around for 4 years, and everybody had been in there, did not succeed, unfortunately. And so he kept having turnover after turnover. And he's like, you know what? It's worth it to me to pay you to come in here. He bought all their equipment. The build out was done, and we opened the doors.
No way. Okay. So I have a question off of that because I saw, there's a handful of articles out there about you, Dale, and Park Avenue Coffee. But specifically during the pandemic, where you sort of came in and you were the contrarian, doing the opposite of what other people seem to be doing, closing doors, and you were opening. Was this one of those stores? Because I think there was an article about, a Starbucks actually closing their store and you were going to take over their space.
So that's our number six store. So there was 3 other opportunities before that one, but that was the latest opportunity. So I don't know. At the time we thought people would be going back to the office, right? Starbucks bailed out of downtown. They put a drive-through in. It's still in downtown, but close to the highway so people could pop on off the highway. The space was there. Another opportunity. A landlord had reached out and said, hey, we have this space. It's already built out. It's already done. The plumbing, the electric, even the cabinets are still in place. Would you be interested in taking it over? And we went down and looked at it and felt like when people came back to the office, it's across the street from the second largest building in downtown and the third largest building in downtown St. Louis, which one of them was in development that unfortunately fell apart during COVID. And the other one is the Metropolitan Square building, which before COVID was 85% occupied. It was a huge building. And we thought, well, when people come back, this is going to be great. Unfortunately, people haven't come back to the office. We all know that. That store is doing okay. It's doing better than our 10th Street location, which is up by the convention center because there's less conventions these days. And, a lot of things have changed. St. Louis has probably been hit harder than maybe some cities with, the lawlessness after COVID and some crime issues and things that we're working through. And hopefully that's going to get better. And we're still doubling down in downtown, and we still have 2 locations in downtown St. Louis. And we're hoping that we can get that turned back around and be back down there. But that was an opportunity that came up during COVID for sure. And the other thing that happened during COVID is Starbucks, not only did they shutter stores for good, they closed stores for 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 weeks during COVID. And some stores were closing, like they didn't have enough staff. They'd only, like in a region of maybe 10 or 15 stores, they'd only have every store open 4 days a week, and they'd be closed 3 so they could open the other ones. And they were doing some like roving closings. And when COVID hit, I'll tell you, that was the worst day of my life, or the worst several weeks of my life, because, you try to build a business. And you get up to that time, we had 5 locations all open with 50 employees that depended on a paycheck. And then all of a sudden, everything's gone. And it's like, what happened? And so, we made a decision that day. Is like, I don't want to stay open if I'm putting my staff in danger. Right. But I also don't want to just close because, well, how am I going to put food on my table? And what am my staff could get unemployment. So we sat down with our team and said, here's the deal. If you want to work, we've got a job for you. We're going to keep you safe. We're going to do social distancing. We're going to do, we're going to do curbside and carry out only. We're going to do masks. We're going to do hand sanitizer, the whole bit. But if you don't want to work, we completely respect that and go draw unemployment until we figure out what's going to go on with this world. We kept every location open during COVID. Limited hours. We cut back some of the stuff because downtown St. Louis was vacant. So we went 7 to 2 Monday through Friday, only for the downtown area. All the rest of the stores stayed open except for one, which was in an office building that literally was vacant. So there was no reason to have that store open. But what happened was our stores that are in neighborhoods grew because those people were all stuck at home too. So to be able to get, even if they had to sit on the patio and they couldn't even come inside, they at least had some place to go, some place for social interaction, some place to see and talk to other people. So it was
crazy. I feel like it sort of got the whole world got turned on its head, but some of the smaller businesses that couldn't make it certainly shuttered their doors. But like you're talking about, those businesses that are in the neighborhoods sort of had a different turn, right? So everything got flipped on its head. That's for sure.
Right. And one of the things is going back into different facets of the business is the diversification, right? So bakery slowed down, obviously, because our coffee customers slowed down for the most part. Our stores were less stores, less hours. But what didn't change is our wholesale operations. So we wholesale coffee outside of the St. Louis region. A lot of outstate, smaller cities, smaller towns outside of the city. And, a lot of those areas didn't really believe there was COVID and they stayed open and there was not an issue and there wasn't as dense population and they didn't have as much exposure as the bigger cities did. We have drive-through chains out just south of Chicago, just in Schererville, Indiana. They have like 6 locations. We were sending them hundreds of pounds of coffee every week just to keep their drive-thrus open because all the Starbucks in Chicagoland, all the Dunkins in Chicagoland closed. So they were getting super busy. So my drive-through customers that we do wholesale coffee for and wholesale supplies did really well. Our stores in the neighborhoods did well. And then, of course, the ones that were by businesses or in office buildings obviously did suffer during COVID for sure.
Yeah, right. Totally agree. All right. So I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit, Dale. I want to talk about, we're gonna shift into maybe some pieces of advice from you. So we know that building a business, building a coffee business, building a bakery, all of those things, like it's absolutely hard work. Put the pandemic aside because that was hard for a lot of people. But I want to talk about what you think it takes to make a successful company. Like for retail, certainly location matters,
Sure.
And you already know that. But it's so much more than that. So if you were to pick, let's say, 3 things that are a must in building a business like this, what would they be?
Yeah, there's a lot to it, obviously. One thing about any business is it's, one thing, even the previous owner of the original store, which was not called Park Avenue Coffee, she thought it was kind of fun and it was a hobby. It's hard work. Working for yourself, people think, oh my gosh, you're the boss. Oh, you can do anything you want. You get to work for yourself. And at the end of the day, you work for every person that works for you because you have to supply them the opportunities to supply them with, a paycheck. And there's a responsibility there for that. The big thing is, I think you have to work really, really hard. People are like, well, I don't know that I want to work 7 days a week. And I'm like, I wouldn't become an entrepreneur if I were you, because it's not a Monday through Friday gig. It really isn't. As time goes on and we're, 18 years in our 18th year now, I am able to take weekends off for the most part. So that's nice. That doesn't mean I'm not at home doing financial statements or balancing checkbooks or something that business people work all the time. But you have to commit to it. There's a huge commitment. I think one thing I said from the very first day that we opened our very first location in Lafayette Square called Park Avenue Coffee was I have high standards to make sure that what we serve our customers is high quality and the service in which we provide our customers is nothing but the best. And to do that, you have to have the right people in place. I would never be where I'm at today without everyone on my team, and our management team is all the way down to our baristas, because they're the front lines. I mean, today I don't do a lot with our individual cafes any longer, just because I'm really working on the roasting company and trying to keep the whole company going and construction projects we have going and all that. So I think having the right people is a huge part of it. And I think being open to opportunity, that whole opportunity thing, because literally every coffee shop that we've opened was not planned. Every location that we're in today was not planned. This was no big master grand plan of like, oh, we're going to do this one, then we're going to do this one, we're going to do this one. It was all opportunities that presented themselves to us, and we were open to those opportunities. And every cafe was because of an opportunity opened up.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so when you look at that and you look at your three things, so it's, taking advantage of opportunity when opportunity is around you, right?
Of course.
It is about putting the right people in place.
Yep.
That really matters. You got to be able to trust them and, people that can jump in and figure things out. And also the first one then you said was essentially quality, right? Quality customer service and putting, everything you have into it. Of course, it's a lot of work, no question. Yeah. And I agree with that from an entrepreneurial standpoint. If you're not willing to put the time in, I'm not sure this is for you.
Right. Yeah. It's not for the faint at heart. That's for sure.
Not for the faint at heart. Okay. So is there one thing that you wish you would have known when you first started the coffee shop or bakery? I mean, when you first dove in and bought it, I should say.
Gosh, that's a great question. I've learned so much. I mean, I said I was a coffee snob, but I really at that time thought that Starbucks had the best coffee and I would only drink Starbucks. I now know better. There's a lot better coffee out there, but at that time we didn't have a lot of options. Oh my gosh. I guess probably initially I didn't think it would take quite as much effort as it took to even just have that one coffee shop and get it together. I think it's a lot more work than I thought. I'm not afraid of that work, so that doesn't bother me, but I just think that this never stops. There's really, even when I do take off a Saturday or a Sunday, last Saturday, a roof in one of our kitchens ceiling fell in because there was a water leak on the second floor. There's always a challenge. There's always something broken. There's always something to be fixed. There's always some sort of a challenge, but no, I don't know if there's any one thing that I can say that I wish I would have known that.
Yeah. Well, I think you're also wired as an entrepreneur, as a leader. So I think that you probably have some of those things innately built in. But I do want to talk about your leadership style, because I think that during the pandemic, it started to really show through around how you approached your employees, saying, if you want to work, great. If not, I respect that, and you really came to the table with a lot of empathy, because I think empathy really, really matters in leadership. But so managing people is hard. And that's something that's been difficult for a lot of people. Has it been difficult for you diving into that role, managing people? And also with your background in IT and with your consulting business, was there something that surprised you about how prepared you really were to do that with the background you have? So sort of a two-folded question, something difficult for you, and is there something that prepared or surprised you?
So working in IT, even when I worked for the big company, I was on the road. I was a field engineer, so I was going from site to site. I had no real people. I was 100% customer focused. I can say that probably one of my biggest weaknesses may be dealing with employees. I will do anything in the world for a customer. Customers are always right. You do whatever it takes. I struggle some with working with our staff. I think empathy is a huge importance. I really work with our staff at our roasting company now and not at the individual cafes. It's just different working with younger folks today and how things are. And I'm wired different than they are. And I struggle with that. So I'll own that's probably one of my weakest things is working with our staff, except at our roasting company, because at a roasting company, I'm here every day. I'm working with them every day. I'm working in the trenches with them side by side. And I'm a strong believer of this with all of our employees, cafe employees, roasting employees, whatever, is I am huge on taking care of people who take care of the company and take care of what we need. So if folks come to me and they're 3 weeks into a job and I see even a barista that I see that's going above and beyond, I'll give them a raise in 3 weeks. I have no issue with that. But I struggle with staff that just come in for a paycheck and don't want to work. And it's hard to me. It's hard for me to handle that kind of stuff. But with our roasting company, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I get that. And I think that's probably the number one challenge in this industry or in any, call it, just hospitality in general, it is about finding that right balance, finding those right people. It's hard. It's hard.
And the last 5 years, we've actually had a position called chief people person, and that's their job. Is scheduling, staff engagement, hiring, working with them in their schedules, working them with time off requests, working on, so I know that that's not my strength. And so I try to put somebody in there that is better at that than me. So I can accept that. But here at the roasting facility with more career employees too, which makes a difference. And I get that coffee shop employees aren't career employees. I get that. Now, everyone that works in our roasting facility has been either our coffee shop employee or we've hired them from another coffee shop. So there are some people that stay in the coffee business and get it. Our roaster's been with us for 15 years. He started out as a barista. Our COO, Talon, our chief operating officer, who basically is over all the cafes and works with our chief people person to do all of our cafes. He's been with us for 16 and a half years. Out of the 17 and a half 18 we've been around. So he's been around since day one. So we've got great team here. I love to take care of those guys. I love to make sure that, they get lunch every Monday on the company. And we just really try to take care of them every day in and day out because they're taking care of us. They're growing our company and they're doing what they need to do to make us successful.
I totally agree with you. Like that, it matters. You want them every day to come in and approach it as if they own the place. And I have to talk about Talon for a little bit because he is one of your executives.
Yep.
And he was a customer of yours. And I'm telling you, first of all, let me let you tell the story because I have a couple points that I think are so brilliant about that story.
Yeah. So Talon was a customer. He would come in. He would come in 3-4 times a day at our Lafayette Square store, which was the only store we had at the time. And he would get Thai iced coffees 3 or 4 times a day. And they're like $8 a piece or whatever, sweetened condensed milk and all the sugar. And so we just got to know him because, again, you build relationships. I always say the other thing is, we're in the people business. We just happen to sell coffee, but we're in the people business and it's all about customer service. That's one of those other highlights of what you have to do is quality product and quality service. But so he was coming in all the time and he asked me one day, he's like, hey, are you hiring anything part-time? And I said, well, yeah. I said, what is your availability? Well, I work a real job Monday through Friday and I really don't want to work weekends, but I'm available after like 4:00. And I'm like, well, we're open later, but our shift changes at 2:00, not 4:00. And there was just something about him. And I'm like, let me see. And so he's like, well, what do you want to do? He's like, well, he kind of told me he was working for this woman who very similar to the Devil Wears Prada. And it was a very challenging situation. And he was buying, picking up the dry cleaning and buying gifts for the people's kids. And it was just a really rough environment for him. And there was just something about him. I'm like, what if we did this 2 days a week? We had a shift change at 4:00 and you work 4 to 10 because we were open till 10:00 at that cafe. He's like, okay. So he started out with his part-time and then did that for a while. And he's like, hey, could I go full-time and manage this cafe? And so we hired him as a manager of our first cafe. And then from there, it just grew. And now he's second in command of everything there is. Hardly any decision is made in the company that he's not involved in.
Yeah. And I love that. And I had the pleasure of meeting him. He's fabulous. You guys are like a unbelievable duo. You both work so well together. But I think it says a lot about not only the quality of what you're producing, but also the environment that you created, that a customer sees it, feels it, loves your company, that they want to step in and work with you. And we had that at our prior company as well, where we had customers that reached out that just wanted to work there and be part of it. So I just think it says a lot about you and what you've built. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And I honestly think that some of our best baristas and some of our best employees have been customers because they understand the business. They understand how we do what we do and they know what we expect because they expected that on the other side of the counter. So now they know how to treat the customers because they know what they got used to feeling and the experience that they had for sure.
Right. So, hey, is there something that any of your employees don't know about you that you wish they would, or maybe something that they do know about you that you wish they wouldn't?
That's a great question. That was probably one of those I was going to tell you not to ask, but I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of, that's one thing about me, good, bad, or indifferent. if it's in my law, I share that. I'm not, Talon and I are very different. He's much more of a private person than I am. But I mean, if anything happens in my world, my team knows about it. There's very little that happens in my world that I don't share. And that's just part of my personality and part of who I am. And I don't think there's anything bad that they know about me. I think as far as I know, but no.
Yeah. No, it's all good. I actually love that sort of that philosophy. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I'm an open book. Same sort of thing. Okay. So in the coffee industry, I think there's a must of, for anyone to visit Origin. It just sort of helps connect the dots. And that, of course, is where we first met. So Origin provided some of those aha moments for me. Were there any aha moments for you in coffee? And if so, like sort of what was the what, when, where?
Yeah. So I think I kind of told a little bit of this story before. The aha moment initially for me was in 2004, 2003, when I did IT in that first coffee shop. And I realized that it was all about relationships and all about people and all about customer service and all the stuff that I loved. That was probably my original aha moment that I want to be in this business. Then as time goes on, I think Origin is huge because I think what you learn at Origin, and you've been to one Origin, I think, so far, and we've been to three. We've been to Costa Rica a couple of times. I've been to Guatemala and I've been to Sumatra, and they're all very different. I think one of the things that we do in Triumph Park Avenue is, again, support local. We can't support local when it comes to coffee because there's no coffee really grown locally to St. Louis. But what you can support is farmers, and not necessarily. We buy very little coffee outside of direct from the farm. So when we originally went to the company that we went to and their farm in Costa Rica, which is kind of their flagship farm, they started that farm in 1960 and they've grown to what it is today. And the way that they take care of their people, the way that they 100% zero carbon footprint when it comes to energy is all hydro generated. All the water that's used comes out of the river that does the hydro generation and is reverse osmosisly clean to drinking water and to process the coffee, and everything that they do, housing for their staff, medical care for their staff, dental care for their staff, elder care for their staff, child care for their pickers, all that stuff. That is the people that you want to support. That is the people that you want to work with. I mean, I get goosebumps just talking about it because they take such amazing care of their staff that they stay for 30 and 40 years working on the farm. And now just recently, if something happens, they have elder care and they can stay on the farm. Because how bad would it be to work for a company for 40 years that you lived on the farm and then when you get old, they kick you out? So having that is... It's just, I mean, you want to support people like that. So buying direct from those farms in Sumatra, we met the people who are picking the coffee. We met the mom who does the paperwork. We met the dad, so it's all about, it goes back to people. The coffee business is 100% about people who grow the coffee, the people who sell it, customers, each other. It's all about relationship with those people. And so the aha moment is when we went to that Origin the first time, we now buy 95% of all coffee from that farming group, because they're doing the right things and they're taking care of people.
You're supporting companies that do good, right? And they give back and they take care of their people. So I'm super supportive of that as well. Yeah. So, okay. So I know we're running out of time and I have a number of other questions. I want to sort of slide in here if I can.
Oh, I have no hard stop, so you're good.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So, so just talking about the coffee industry as a whole, right? I think I entered it thinking there's not a whole lot of debate or a whole lot of areas for innovation or whatever. I was totally wrong. So there's a lot of debate on a lot of different things. And one of them in particular is actually a gap between coffee professional flavor preferences and the end customer flavor, I guess I'll say flavor preferences. Particularly, I'll speak to the US because I'm not sure about the rest of the world. But how do you view that gap? And what do you think the industry needs to do to close it? And maybe, I know you know sort of about this and what this all means. So maybe even give a synopsis of what that really means. Because I think if I heard this for the first time, not being in coffee, I'd be like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? So sort of summarize it and then jump in what you think the industry needs to do to close that gap.
Well, I mean, I think, as I said, 20 years ago, I thought Starbucks was all that in a bag of chips. And I think Starbucks is a great company, but I think also there's better coffee out there. And I think it's all an education thing. And it goes from back to everything. I mean, we all learn as we grow. And I think one thing with the coffee scene in St. Louis and basically any city around the country is it's growing every day, right? You get new people coming in. It's all about education. You know, we all do tours of our roasting facility. We'll tell them about direct trade. And I think it's educating your customer. And I think everybody, for the most part, kind of does that. You know, obviously you're learning it right now on the fly kind of thing. But I think, you know, customers, I mean, you talk about coffee professionals and, you know, there's some ultra coffee snobs that say, oh, you can't put cream in my coffee because it's too good for cream. And then you've got other people that are like, hey, it's your coffee. You're drinking it. You're buying it. Do whatever you want to with it. You know, and I'm kind of the guy that like, you're buying great coffee. And if you like it with a little bit of cream and a little bit of sweetener, then you should buy it with a little bit of cream and a little bit of sweetener and you should drink it and enjoy it. Life is too short to drink it and to do anything anybody else wants you to do. Do what you want to do, right? So, I mean, as you know, coffee has the same kind of a flavor wheel as what wine does. And how many people drink wine and don't pick up the Meyer lemon and the oaky, smoky flavor with the under notes of cranberry, but they enjoy drinking a glass of wine, right? So I don't get too hung up in all of that stuff. I'm not a huge snob saying you can't put cream and sugar in my coffee. If you want cream and sugar in my coffee and you enjoy it, then do it, right? So I think it's an education thing, and I think it's obviously come a long way in the last 10 years, and it's going to come a lot longer in the next 10 years. And I think that's the coolest thing about coffee is we have places in St. Louis that will shun you if you put sugar and cream in your coffee. And there's other places that you come and enjoy whatever you want to, and no one judges you. And so it's yeah.
You hit the nail on the head. It's education at the end of the day, right? But Absolutely. At the end of the day, the customers can do whatever they want. They can choose whatever they want, and we will be happy to give it to them.
Yeah, so, we have caramel lattes on the menu for a reason because people want them, right?
Exactly. So, okay, so is there a coffee publication that you reference that helps you keep up with the trends in the industry?
I look at all of them. There's Fresh Cup out there. You've got Roast Magazine out there. You've got Barista Magazine. I get an online every day, a daily coffee news. I mean, I look at all of them. I don't have a lot of time to read through every one of the publications, but I do get the daily stuff that hits the highlights. And if there's any headlines that are important to me, and I think just trying to keep your hands on all that stuff, honestly.
Yeah, sure. Is there a coffee industry stat that you I either find interesting, fascinating, or just follow? I mean, besides coffee futures, right? Because for coffee futures prices, everybody's got that on their radar with their own financials.
No, I think one of the things it's intriguing to me is that, you know, thinking back when I was 18 years old, I think the fastest growing demographic of coffee is 18 to 24 year olds. So it's amazing how young people are starting to drink coffee now. I think as a kid, you just had a little bit of coffee with a half a gallon of milk just so you could be like mom or like dad when you drank your coffee. But no, I think just seeing the number of young folks that are coming in even before school to get coffee, I think that's an interesting stat, just the growth there.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. My youngest, who's 17 right now, she'll do her morning run for coffee. So, okay. Do you have a random fascinating fact that most coffee consumers probably don't know about coffee?
Here's one, because we air roast our coffee. Okay. So that's kind of a unique process. You're going to be using the same type of technology on roasting your coffee as we do. So you're going to be one of the cool kids. 10 years ago, probably 1% of all coffee in the world was air roasted. 1%.
Okay.
So that's an interesting fact. And now we're going to be part of that 1%. And that 1% is probably approaching, I don't have the exact number, but I'm going to guess it's approaching about 10% now. But that means 90% of all coffee is drum roasted, which is originally how coffee was roasted in drum roasters.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did not know that fact. I always like to be part of the underdog and see how far we can push those percentages, right?
Right. Yeah, and it's turning around, because the big reason is it wasn't really a commercially viable option. There were not large enough roasters made to do bigger batches, so you couldn't really grow your company with that. So it stayed pretty niche, honestly. And I also think that one other fun fact is that an average pound of coffee has 4,000 coffee beans in it, And the average coffee bean has probably been touched by about 4 hands by the time it's picked and sorted as cherry coffee, and then sorted as green coffee. Probably has had 4 hands that's touched it. So each bag of coffee probably has about 16,000 hands that touch that bag of coffee before you get it.
Seriously, that absolutely like blows my mind. I love numbers, so I'm already like putting that into my repertoire. Okay.
Right.
All right. So I am going to close out here with what I call the U3 top 3. So very brief answers. What is your favorite brewing method?
I am obsessed with cold brew.
Okay. All right.
If I'm brewing at home, I'm doing French press. And if I am drinking in the cafes, 100% of the time it's cold brew.
Okay. Well, this kind of answers the next question, but coffee drink of choice, like black or with extras, like
So
latte,
I
hot and cold.
will own this as a coffee professional. I put a half a pump of agave and just a splash of whole milk in it because our cold brew has such great chocolate notes. It's almost like drinking chocolate milk. So it's a treat every day. I do one of those 20 ounces every day, and that's it.
Okay. Well, the last question you already answered it. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
Yeah. If it's a really early morning.
Cup.
Yeah. If it's a really, really early morning, there might be a second one in there, but 99% of the time it's one 20-ounce cold brew coffee, 7 days a week. That's it.
Okay. That is awesome. All right. So for the IT coffee snob, right? I want to give you the opportunity to share where someone can learn more about you, or about Park Avenue Coffee, or where someone can get some of that amazing gooey butter cake.
Yes. Awesome. Well, again, Park Avenue Coffee, it's parkavenuecoffee.com. You can get information about wholesale operations. You can get information about our gooey butter cake and, of course, our whole bean coffee. We're constantly switching it up with new stuff. And so you can get all of our coffees online at parkavenuecoffee.com. That
is perfect. Thanks so much for joining us today, Dale.
I had a blast. Thank you so much for having us. I'm glad to be involved and super excited to see your roasting lab once you get all up and running.
Awesome. And thank you for helping us unite the world through coffee. And thanks to you, our followers, for joining us at U3 Coffee. We'll see you next time.